beautiful people, I'm Raish Phoenix, and in today's video I will be showing you guys the behind the scenes for my Skarlet Photoshoot. Starting off with the makeup, my main inspiration behind the look that I did, or one of the main inspirations, was the current eye look of Skarlet in the Mortal Kombat 11 game. I'm starting off by swatching the eyeshadow that I plan on using. The reason why I do this is because in the past, before I used to do this, I noticed that I would think that certain colors would look a certain way together, but then when I would put it on my eyelid, it would be completely different. It would either be cooler or warmer than I would expect it to be. So the reason why I like to swatch my looks or swatch the eyeshadow before I even film a look is so I know how they'll work together, and then I can see if certain colors are too warm or too cool to be placed next to each other. As you can see, Megan the Stallion. So another inspiration behind the look I did was her current makeup artist, who is Lauren Elise Child. I know it's a bit cut off right now, but bear with me. I like the way she does Megan's eyes because if you look, you can see how her eyeshadow is also connected to her nose contour, her upper nose contour, and I just like how it kind of just accentuates that inner eyelid space while also just utilizing her entire eyelid, like by the brow bone, and just accentuating that area. So I really wanted to use that as inspiration for my Skarlet look. My main focus with the colors I was using was to choose colors that are slightly muted but still vibrant, warm hues. I wanted it to complement my cosplay and not overpower it, just mostly add to that vibrant red that I knew I was going to be wearing. So I definitely think about and consider the colors of what I'm wearing to help choose the eye look in a way that it will help add to it. Right now you guys are seeing that I write down everything, so this is how I keep track of the products I'm going to be using. I write down the colors, where I'm putting it, if it's on the crease, the lid, the eyelashes I'm using. I just write down as much as possible to eliminate the guesswork the day of the photo shoot when I'm doing my makeup. Moving on to TikTok. So I'm always filming TikToks to go along with my cosplays. So writing this down again helps a lot. And what I do is I create a note on my iPad with whatever I need to be mindful of when it comes to whether or not the cosplay requires a transition, whether or not it's an interaction between two different cosplays. I basically create a legend. That's what I'm saying. I create a legend and it lets me know what I need to do for each audio that I plan on working with, and I write down the name of the audio. So again, my goal is always to eliminate as much thought as possible. I want the day of the photo shoot to just go simply to focusing on bringing the images or the videos to life, as opposed to any other thing from that, because it's a lot to do the day of. Moving on to poses. So I sketched out the poses that I wanted to do. I was mostly focusing on action poses, and I watched back Mortal Kombat 9 and Mortal Kombat 11 different combos that people have on YouTube, like just breaking down the different attacks that she does to get a good idea for how she moves, how she poses. And also in Mortal Kombat 11, I like that we see more of her in the story, so we're able to get a better idea of what's important to Skarlet, her loyalty to Shao Kahn, her blood magic, and how those things play a part in the expressions on her face and how she poses and just her overall energy. So stuff like that definitely plays a part in what I like to pay attention to when it comes to bringing these characters to life. We'll get a little bit into it later, but I also wanted to see if there was a way that I can bring her blood magic to life, because I knew it was something important to her. Here's a look over all the sketches that I did. Am I gonna get to all these? Of course not, but at least it gives me an idea of how she moves, and to just look at it and reference it while I'm shooting so I know what to do. Moving on to the swords. So I made these swords years ago and I was supposed to show you guys how I did it, but never got around to it until now, which is why I'm going to show you guys how I made these. So I'm going to start off with showing you the sword. The first thing I did was, on paper, I created a sketch of how I wanted the sword to look, and pretty much just getting an idea for the dimensions so I knew exactly what scale I would need to cut each piece off to match what I wanted it to be. So right here on the handle, I used pink insulation foam. I got this from Home Depot, but of course that's not the only place you can get it from. I believe it's an inch thickness. You can see how it matches up with like the handle. So pretty much I just cut out a rectangle and I sanded it down. I carved it out first with an X-Acto blade, and then I sanded it down, and that's how I was able to create the handle. Moving on to the base and the upper part of the pink insulation foam, and you can see how it wraps around the entire piece. Also how it's on the bottom. So for that, I used black craft foam. So I got this from Michael's, I believe, and you can see how the material is easily bendable. So I decided to use that to help with wrapping around the parts of the pink insulation foam. And I think this is the same craft foam piece that I used. So you can see how I could just easily wrap it around there. And I glued it on with hot glue. There's a lot of hot glue that was utilized to make this sword. But you can see how I just glued it around. It's easily bendable. And then for the circles at the top, I'm pretty sure it was a circle on the left. That's how I created the very base of the sword handle, and I just glued that part on with hot glue. Also, for right here in between the handle and the blade, that part around the rim is also black craft foam. And then also the part right above that, that base right there, is also the black craft foam. I just cut out like two rectangular square-like shapes and glued it on. But for that whole circle area, I use black foam core, and I think I got this from an art store. Either way, I'm pretty sure you can get it from Michael's or on Amazon, but that is what I use to create that circle right there. And for the blade, so if you can look, you can see in the middle how there's a shadow being casted there. That is because I have a wooden dowel in there. So the wooden dowel I'm pretty sure I got from Michael's, and I extended it probably to about right there in the handle. I just carved out like a section in the pink insulation foam, and then I hot glued it in there. So I did that, and then also I had to create a hole in that area, the base between the handle and the blade, and I just created a hole in that and put it down so that I wouldn't have to compromise how the wooden dowel is intact with the handle of the sword. And then for the blade, I'm pretty sure I may have used watercolor paper, I think, because I wanted a paper that would be sturdy but still on a budget with what I already had. So I just cut out the blade, and then I glued layers of watercolor paper together with the hot glue, and that was how I made it. So this is pretty much the construction of the sword. I think the handle was the only thing I used watered down gesso with as a base, but then from there I just went on top and painted the entire thing. I definitely freehanded the diamonds at the bottom, which is why they look a little bit wonky, but yeah, this was on a budget, the best I could do back then. And yeah, as you can see, like I should have made the handle longer. Like I didn't think about that until literally I redid this cosplay recently. I was like, girl, the handle, you can only put one hand, but you know, it's fine, it works. Moving on to the sheath. So the entire sheath is made out of, drumroll, craft foam. It's a craft foam again. So I wanted something that, again, a material that I already had. You can see how it's bendable, so I don't have to worry about it like breaking or anything. And I just painted it to make sure that it looked presentable. But pretty much, yeah, the entire thing is just, again, like looping around the bottom and the top section of it so that it kind of had more of a, I don't know, mass to it, so to speak, and it wasn't just like a regular tube. And creating that bottom part again, kind of like how I did at the bottom of the base of the sword. Right down the middle, you can see that's duct tape, y'all. That is duct tape. So what I did was I took the duct tape, I think I cut it in half, and I used that to create that initial first tube of black foam core, and then, not black foam core, oh my god, of the black craft foam. And then on top of that, that's where I created that rim base that you can see, the silver rim base, so that it would cover up the parts of the duct tape at the very top and at the very base. And to create the sheath, I literally just measured it. I think I did something like this. Like I think I just wrapped the foam around it to get a good idea for how like secured I wanted it to be in the sheath, to still allow it to hold in there but not be too tight, so it would be difficult to just like take the sword out. And yeah, that's how I made it. Again, I just painted directly on it. The reason why I'm working with so much black foam core or black foam is because I feel like it just adds, like it's easier to paint over as opposed to like the pink insulation foam, which is why I used the gesso, I'm pretty sure I did, to create a base. But I think that when you work with a color that's dark, it creates a good base for whatever color you're putting on top. And then for right here to keep the sheath together, literally I'm just showing you the motion of how I wrapped yarn around it, and that's just how I keep these together. And then I just tied the yarn together at the ends, so that's how the sheaths stay together on my back, and that's how I made these swords. Moving on to lighting, so I'm just going to show you guys briefly kind of like the trial and error of how I figure out the lighting I'm going to do. One of the things you want to pay attention to is the room you're shooting in, whether the walls are light or dark, because that's going to play a part in where you put your lights, and also kind of like how much light is reflected back on you. Because if you were shooting in a room with lighter walls, you're going to have the light bouncing back off and onto you, versus if you're shooting in a room that's darker, you're probably going to have to move the lights closer to you so that you're well lit, because the darker walls are gonna just eat up the light. So for this part, you can see a little bit how around the rim of the frame there is a light that I have there, and then on the outer edge I have an LED light that is controlled with a remote. So what I'm doing right now is I decided that the back rim color would be red, and now I'm just using the remote to figure out, in addition to the red that's behind me, what color do I want to have to kind of fill in the shadows that are going to be on the right side of me. I was at first thinking about doing maybe complementary colors, or maybe something where it's just fully red, but because the cosplay I'm going to be wearing is all red, I was kind of like, I don't know if that's the best idea. So right now I'm changing the color of the ring light that's on my left. So another thing I want to say is, I know that ring lights have tripods on it, but like I said before, depending on the room you're shooting in, is going to play a part in whether or not you need the light closer or farther away from you, which affects the framing if you have the camera attached to the ring light. And this is a reason why I use a separate tripod for my camera as opposed to the one that's already attached to the ring light, because you're going to notice that sometimes you're going to need the light closer to you, but then when you have the light closer to you, and if you have your phone attached or the camera attached to the tripod, now you're framing yourself differently and you're not getting your entire self in the frame. Or maybe you are getting your entire self in the frame, but you're so overlit that you're losing the shadows of your features. So this is why I like to pay attention to where I put the lights, like how far or how close they are to me, because that's going to play a part in how I photograph and the shadows that are casted or not casted on myself. In the end of just going through the motions of doing this, and this is pretty much what I do right before I'm going to shoot. Of course, you can always figure this out at whatever point is easiest in your process, but I do this right before I'm about to put on my cosplay. So you can see that I already have my makeup done. I already set up my space for shooting. The lights are everywhere where they need to be. And at this point, like I said, I'm just figuring out what colors will work best with even also my makeup look and stuff like that. So that's why I'll like move my face around and see like how the light is reflecting off of my complexion as well. Also, I wear glasses, so if you see me squinting, that's why. A girl can't see, okay? But I have a monitor to my left, so that's what I'm looking at. So here's my lighting setup. At the very top, I have a ring light that's held in place by the backdrop clamps. Then you can see the Christmas lights I use as a border that I can change as needed. To my left, which is on the right of the camera right now, is a ring light, and then on the opposite side is where I have another LED light. Here I'm looking at the paper of the sketches that I did for the poses that I want to do. So this comes in handy when I first start shooting, because once I put my cosplay on, I'm kind of like, what am I doing? So this helps with just going over what I have planned and how I want to go about it. At this point, you can see that I am just figuring out my pose. So one thing I want to mention about posing is that it's definitely going to help when you do the actual motion. So although I have poses drawn, right? So I have a pose drawn and I could just do the pose, right? But the thing about a lot of these attack poses is that sometimes you'll do it based off of how you see it. But then when you actually act it out, like you actually move your arm into that motion to hit that pose, or you actually move whatever, your leg, whatever part of your body that is going to be utilized for doing this attack, you start to notice that your muscles play a part, of course, in how you pose. And I think that that's something I've definitely found helps a lot with bringing these poses to life. When you do the motion, your body's naturally kind of communicating to you what's natural for you, or what is more realistic for you to do this pose, as opposed to just looking at something and mimicking it. And I feel like it gets a more natural look in the photo, and it also plays a part in your expression. So while I'm showing you guys this footage, I am going to show you guys the shot that was taken. If I have it edited, I will show you guys the shot that was taken while I did these poses. Another thing that plays a part in my process of taking these photos is having good music on. Music helps a lot. I have always felt deeply connected to music in my creative process, whether I'm drawing, doing my makeup, doing a photo shoot. It definitely sets a vibe, and I feel like it just brings out those feel-good emotions, you know, and it helps bring these looks and expressions to life. Another thing is that it helps to have a monitor on the side. So I have the camera connected with an HDMI cable to the TV, which is how I'm able to see what I'm doing, which is why you see me constantly looking to the left. And I actually have my shutter release button in the band of my underwear, which is why you see me putting my hand there every now and then, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at the monitor to make sure that it's focused on my face, and then I'll put the timer setting on so that the only thing I have to do is just move my arm away from the shutter button and just finish the pose that I'm doing. Another thing you want to do, which is something I learned through trial and error, even though you have a monitor there and you're able to see yourself shooting, you're going to want to look at it on the computer or whatever device you plan on posting and editing it on. Because sometimes I will look at it on the monitor and be like, oh, this picture's fire, like the TV's showing me such an amazing photo. And then I look at the computer and I'm like, girl, these colors are different. Girl, this pose don't look as fire as it did on the TV. So I think it helps a lot to go back while you're shooting. Every couple of photos, just go back and check. Another thing is you want to be mindful of your white balance. For myself, since I'm working with a lot of these different colored lights, and also just my complexion and the color of the clothes that I'm wearing is going to play a part in what the camera is reading and how it's going to compensate for the light and just affecting how the image, you know, the final image comes out. So you definitely want to check your white balance, make sure that it's on whatever setting is necessary, so that when you take these photos, you're not like, oh wow, I looked cool toned in this one, but now I look warm toned in the other one, and now it's something different, you know. Like for me, I just want my photos to be cohesive. I want them to all look like a body of work. Like if I was presenting a bunch of pictures in one spot at a museum or something, like I want to make sure that all my pictures look like a body of work that's well thought out. So that's why I like to be mindful of the lighting, where I'm placing myself in the frame, and just the white balance of the camera. I also want to say, make sure you take breaks while you're shooting. For me, I'm usually shooting for hours. Like I could start at 8 p.m. and then be done at like 3 or 4 a.m. You know, like I shoot for a very long time. And also on top of that, I'm doing video content like this and also the TikToks that I'm doing and the makeup tutorial and all that stuff. So it takes a very long time. But the reason why I say take breaks is because sometimes while you're shooting, it can take a minute to really get into the flow of bringing these images to life. And for me, I know that sometimes I could beat myself up about it. Sometimes I can be like, I have these poses drawn, I'm doing them, but I don't feel great. Like I knew on this day, I wasn't feeling that great. like I was just like, man, I don't feel great. I don't know if these photos are gonna look great. But sometimes taking that break, looking at the photos, seeing what poses you liked, and sometimes even just doing slight differences. Like maybe the pose was right, but maybe the way you had your head position didn't flow right, or maybe the expression wasn't that right. Like give yourself room to redo things, or to reshoot a pose, to take a break, come back, see if you feel more energized, get a snack, do whatever you gotta do to just refresh on your energy and be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. You know, you put a lot of work into doing this thing, and I think that it's important to, you know, remember that there's always room for growth and you can always get better, and to just be kind to yourself through the process, because the last thing you need is to be an enemy to yourself while trying to create something great, you know? Like, just be kind to yourself while you're creating. Another thing I want to add is sometimes I can't even tell what photos are great the day of shooting. So that's another reason why I say be kind to yourself and give yourself grace, because sometimes the photos the day of, I'm just like, man, I don't know if I got anything. And then literally 24 hours later, 2 days later, a week later, I look at them and I'm like, these are fire. What was I talking about? So give yourself time. Like, I feel like with social media just being so fast, and if you are a content creator and if you're doing this to be sharing it with others, it can be like you feel a pressure to share them as soon as you have it done. But give yourself a couple days if needed to look over the images and see if they look any different to you, because sometimes you don't realize how well of a job you did until after you've rested, you've taken a break, you haven't looked at it in a while, and you see how well you did. So, you know, give yourself time to just figure it out, and yeah, don't be too hard on yourself. Remember how I said I wanted to see if I can bring her blood magic to life? So this is what I'm doing. So what I did is that I have a LED strip wrapped around my hand. Now, of course, at a convention, this would hit different, but because I'm taking photos and I know I can play with what's in and outside of focus, I decided I would put the LED lights around my arm so I can kind of have it out of frame, or just have it close enough to the camera so that it's blurry and all you see is a light and not the fact that it's actually like a bunch of lights around my arm. And then I created this little ball. So pretty much that little ball is paper, right? I crumbled up paper into a ball, and then I took clear thread. I forgot what it's called. There's a specific word for it, but I took clear thread, right? And I wrapped it around that ball, and then I got thread, like crocheting thread that's a very like red, that's still on brand with like the colors of my cosplay, and I just wrapped it around it until you couldn't see the paper anymore. And the rest of the string that's wrapped around that interior of the paper, I created a little knot so that I can actually attach it to my finger. So that is what I'm doing to create this like blood magic moment. So like I said, I knew it would be out of focus, and I don't know, like I was trying to just do this on a budget, play around with little different stuff or whatever, but this is pretty much what I came up with, and this is probably like one of my favorite shots that I've done. Like, I just like how these shots turn out. Like, they look really dope with the lighting. Here's a look at a couple of my other favorite shots that I did. If you'd like to see more shots from this cosplay or others that I've done, you can check out my Ko-fi, which will be linked in the description box below. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Bless up, and until next time, sending out much peace, love, and enlightenment. Bye, guys.